I'm gonna reconnect Bluetooth and see if it connects.
All right, thank you.
Just happy you know what you're doing.
As I'm.
Hey, we can hear you now.
Oh,
All right, thank you.
I just have to reconnect.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. Right, Connor, if we could just click on the small scale criteria. The background here, Dennis, is that we, at the end of the last round of small scale, were asked to give feedback on how the round of small scale went. And you'll remember we discussed at FAMPO that we felt that there was room for a new category of MPO with a different number of project slots that could be added to the small scale program. So until now, we've had two categories of MPO, large MPOs and small MPOs. And the number of slots they get to submit projects is determined by whether they fit into large or small MPO categories. So we have suggested an intermediate category, a mid-level category, and we ran that by you, and you supported it, and that we gave that as our feedback. VDOT, OIB, and eventually CTB have met and discussed proposed changes as a result of the input from around the state. And what is being proposed now to the CTB is in fact the opposite. That in fact the number of slots for everybody get reduced. Right. And this is the proposal that is currently in front of the CTB. We have our regional CTB member here who looks like they want to say something.
I'm happy to recognize the sellers.
Yes, that is not how I understood it to be, that there would be a new cap on the number of applications. There is discussion about high priority projects program, HPP, which is what MPOs and the PDCs qualify for. So it's not, to my knowledge, it didn't register as we were reducing the number, but that they are putting some, that we are discussing putting some more criteria on how HPP projects are rated.
So these are your slides from your CTB meeting, and it gives those numbers there. If you have a look on that particular page, reduction in the cap limit options. So the maximum pre-applications is currently 5 or 12, depending on what size MPO you are.
So this was from May. This was not what we saw last week.
This was the proposal that we were given after the May meeting.
Okay.
Those are the options that were proposed, and the discussions were attached. Those are the numbers that were given to us.
Right, so no decisions have been made. I did bring up at the CTB meeting to add in that third category. And so it is coming up. No decisions have been made. We will have our workshop when we meet here in Fredericksburg next month. So we are hosting the CTB, or I am hosting the CTB next month. And one of the days, essentially an additional day, will be spent on Smart Scale. So there are changes to Smart Scale. The focus is on the HPP projects. Again, that impacts your MPOs and PDCs. But to my knowledge right now, it's not necessarily going to be number of projects you can apply to, but there are new criteria that are coming up.
So I just need to revisit what you just said, because we are in danger if I'm right. Okay, if I'm wrong, then we may not be, but if I'm right, and if Paul Paganello is right, and if this tactic right, we are in danger, and we're in danger because of the slide. And we acknowledge that this has been withdrawn. This is an official proposal.
So define we are in danger.
I'm about to. Those number of slots is the problem for us. So if you look there, the tier 1 and tier 2, that what is current, that says it doesn't think it is not there, that's what we have now. So we put in 5 applications for FAMPO and 5 for GWRC, and then we have to reduce that by 1 to 4 and 4. Large MPOs like Hampton Roads or Richmond get 12, and then they reduce it to 10. Then the proposal is either option 1 or option 2, right? And the option 1, you have 4 maximum applications for the small MPO, which you then have to reduce to 3, or even worse, you only get 3 application slots and you have to reduce it to 2. Now, we'd love for there to be a middle category as well, which we asked for. However, should the proposal that was presented to the May CTV go forward, we're in trouble. And we're in trouble because of we had 5 reducing to 4. Now we could either have 4 reducing to 3 or 3 reducing to 2, but we don't know yet because the final decision, as we said, has not been made. We don't know what's going to be chosen, but that was the proposal. Why that is problematic, and we can go through all the slides, but I'd rather just tell you quickly verbally what the problem is. The problem is, if you reduce the number of slots, it means that we have to implement less projects for the next round of Smart Hill than we have been spending in the past. Doesn't sound disastrous until you realize that means that among us, we have to guess which of our proposed projects are going to be more successful. That's the big problem. Because if we get wrong, projects in the Northern Neck or the Middle Peninsula or somewhere else, they do better than us for the district.
No,
Yes.
you don't qualify for district money as an MPO or a PDC. You only
Well,
qualify for HPP money.
So there are 2 categories of money that we qualify for. The current BCR trail came out of the state pot, not out of the pot for our district.
Right, because the city of Fredericksburg put that in. Well, an MPO and a PDC only qualify for HPP.
I don't think that's true because the project was submitted by FAMPO, not by the city, and it was fully funded.
We can look at it, but when you go through the funding scenario,
The
and they-
fact that he submitted it and the fact that it was approved, I'm not sure which bucket, but I was told that that did not come out of the district bucket of funds, it came out of the state bucket.
HPP money,
So,
that is.
so we're more or less on the same page. The point is that if it's HPP money, if we don't get it because our project doesn't score well, it could go anywhere in the state. If it's the district money, bear in mind that, clarify that, if we don't get it, it could go somewhere else in the district, right? Not to one of the big FAMPO or one of the 5 districts. So that means that we have to guess better when we split our projects because we will have less slots. We have to make sure that the 2 or the 3 that we split for FAMPO and the 2 or the 3 that we split for GWRC are going to be the best ones. And that's a little bit subjective because I'm not sure I can guess, and I'm not sure that we can guess exactly which one's going to be better than another one beforehand. Because the scoring is done in Richmond by some people. We are not party to that, not a, we can't even
But
one.
it's not this nebulous process, right? It is a process that was created to try and add some criteria and standards. It's not like people sitting in a small office in Richmond just come up with a score.
No, there are a lot of objective criteria. There are 5 criteria, key criteria, and each one has got some details about how it operates. But still, we've been unable to predict, for example, which of our projects are going to do well. Lafayette Boulevard is a prime example. It didn't score as well as we'd hoped. We don't actually know why. We can afterwards ask questions, I guess, but it's both objective and a little bit opaque, I would say, because we can't see how that score is made up. We get told, here's the score. You scored so much for economics, so much for whatever, but we don't exactly know. It's sort of, it's much more objective than a political process, so we're not knocking the process. It is a good process, but we're just saying the onus falls on us to guess which projects are better. So if you have more slots, it's less pressure to guess correctly. The fewer slots you have, the more pressure there is to guess correctly. And I'm not sure that we, even at the tech level, people can have different opinions, I'm sure. But I'm not sure we can guess well because it's a little bit complicated. I me say that, complicated.
Mr. Kelly?
Two things, Laura. As you know, you were on the board when this was all going on, and we have issues with the criteria. But we'll take that to that side. I'm more curious right now before I say anything else. There's two issues here to make. There's a numbers issue, and you mentioned we're changing the criteria again. Can you give us at least what the rationale coming out of the CTV is for this change?
So they do it every time. Every time SmartScale goes through them, they do a review process, right? This is a living document. This is a living process. So we want to make it better each and every time. So we are looking at and reviewing the previous 5 rounds, including the current round, to see how we can make it better. And CTV members, including myself, provided some feedback on the use of the HPP and the use of the HPP. And so there are a system of presentations that we are now getting, including this one, but there is another presentation that we received last week that updates this a little bit. And then in July, we'll all come together where we will have an opportunity to talk about this. But it is not, I don't want it to seem like, oh, we're fighting the boogeyman, right? We're not fighting the boogeyman. Okay, the money, we will still fight, we will still be competitive in the Fredericksburg district. That's not going to change. And we'll still make a good argument. I mean, you can look at what we did receive this year, and we were able in the Fredericksburg district to argue and articulate for at least one project that may or may not have been a favorite project, right? But we still got it. And so what I would say is make sure that when you're putting out the concerns, we're not going to understand the process, because this is going into the 6th round. And at this point in time, it's not going away, right? This process is here to stay. And so we can continue picking and screaming and saying we don't like it, and it's not going to matter. It's staying.
So,
Or we can be part of it.
Well, the fundamental question is what is the specific rationale for the reduction of slots? What was the reason for that?
if I could
Well,
also,
Person to
I'm
try.
trying to figure out what the
This
thinking is.
hasn't been determined yet.
Oh, I'm not going to determine, but somebody had to come up with it for a reason to bring it to the CAB.
Because the number of projects is too much.
It is.
It's about staff time.
it's in the back.
Yes. It's taking a lot of time for the state to resolve this.
Ms. Bonte,
Never mind, that was the question I was gonna ask.
is it hearing?
So it's actually in the presentation. I just want to get on a couple of slides there. Let's go down to slide 1 to give you the reasons. There you go. Recommends reducing the applications caps for entities. Focus on improving outcomes, because they say not enough applications are successful, which we think isn't true, because 37% of your applications getting funded is a pretty high success rate, we think. And there is another line in that presentation which talks about staff.
I believe it's on.
Second slide.
Yeah, staff.
Right there.
There is a need for staff at the district offices of VDOT around the state to provide support to help MPOs and localities complete their applications, do things like park estimates, check the park estimates, do sometimes engineering points. And the point is that takes time, and in not all districts of the state of Virginia does it appear there are sufficient staff to be able to provide the assistance that has been happening to this point. And so they're saying, don't have enough staff. It's taken a lot of time to support in the putting together these applications. Therefore, we need to reduce the number of slots so we get less applications, so that we have enough staff time to be able to assist.
All right, Ms. Bonte.
So my question would be, you're saying that it's the staff throughout the state at every residency. When you look at the success that we had, I guess I really feel like we need to drill down into that second bullet there. 50% of our submitted applications are not ready for scoring at the full application submission. 90% at pre-application what that tells me is there are other issues,
So,
but I don't know what those would be. That would have to be something from VDOT,
to be honest,
the staff in the various jurisdictions.
that
I think Michelle,
that 90% is nonsense, because the point is, pre-application is not meant to be a full application. So saying that only 90% are not full, well, they're not meant to be. My understanding of the process is your pre-application, you start with the basics of your project, and then you have to add to it all the supporting documents, which takes time, right? So they're not meant to, at pre-app stage, have every last economic development supporting document, for example. We get them all done by final submission, but we don't do them in pre-application, don't we?
Items that are required at submission, this bullet point means that 50% of the applications, at full applications, do not have all of the required studies, backup documentation, estimates, schedules. And then during that validation process, VDOT, each district has to work with the applicants to gather.
Five of the six.
And find the missing things. So, and that's across the board, every district, including Fredericksburg.
So I have a very unique perspective here that I would like to share, if I may.
Please.
When I was on King George County staff, 2017 and 2018, I was grant writer, and I was the one who wrote and submitted the smart scale applications for our community. I had no other than having been an Arlington County police officer 20 years ago, directed traffic, I had no transportation planning experience whatsoever. I relied heavily upon VDOT staff and Paul when he was administrator here. I think every 2 weeks or so, I was either coming here or I was going up to the district office and doing a webinar with Paul and with Stephen Haynes, and they taught me how to do it, and they helped me improve the applications. It's all well and good if you're a larger locality like Spotsylvania or Stafford, that you have qualified transportation planners on your staff who know what to do, maybe even some engineers that can do the project sketch, things like that. But if you're a smaller locality like mine, you don't have the resources like that on the local level. So smaller localities are absolutely relying on VDOT staff to help us get these applications across the finish line. And so troubling, I get your point, Ian, about the 90%, but to me, it's still very troubling that a full application deadline, 50% of them are still not ready for scoring. And then VDOT staff is again having to reach back to whoever the point person is in the SMART portal. Hey, you need this, or hey, you need that. I've seen this process, and thank goodness that year we were very successful. We had 2018, we had 2 projects funded off the bat. One of them was the highest scoring in the Fredericksburg district that year. It's because of the help I got here from Paul, because of the help I got from VDOT, from the local office up on Beacon. And then we had a third one that thankfully GWRC funded. But smaller localities, they don't have the resources to do this kind of thing. I can understand why maybe there needs to be a capital number of applications, because in my mind, you want to see quality. You want to see quality applications, not quantity, in my opinion.
So I want to address that point for just 1 second, because if the chief constraint that we're discussing here is staff time. Okay, fair point, and I really do appreciate your perspective on stuff. And I think there's a lot to be said for how much those smaller localities can and should be helped, as far as transportation goes, because it's a super complex issue, without a doubt. When we talk about over 50% of submitted applications are not ready for scoring at the full application deadline, has there ever been any discussion of disqualifying those applications, thus freeing staff time to review those applications at the full final deadline and not chasing after them? Because I think there's something to be said for providing the help, up to the deadline. By all means, please help the counties that need it, help the localities that do not have the qualified staff and take advantage of the expertise. But once we get to the deadline, I don't know, have there ever been any internal discussions about being a little stricter as far as that goes?
I think VDOT stance has been, we've tried to help people so that we don't take the harsh, we're gonna screen your applications out over these little things to try to
Yeah.
be more of a partner and not,
And VDOT has,
like, you're missing one thing, so we're gonna kick you out.
I'm sure that VDOT has helped, but I must also say that some of the not readiness revolves around interpretation of the technical guide. And I'll give you one example that really got on those was background. The interpretation of which economic development sites would qualify to support your application. There was language in the handbook which talked about the distance from the site to your project. And there were two different interpretations, and both of them, their words in the handbook, which talk about the driving distance in the one case, and in the other one talks about a buffer. Now, if you do GIS, a buffer is a circle or shape around the project, but a driving distance is a completely different thing. So our applications use the buffer, and it actually has the word buffer in the handbook. But there's a little footnote which we missed, which says linear driving distance, access distance, right? Now that's an interpretation and a clarification that we have argued needs to be put in the handbook so we don't have that mess again next time. But remember, it's not always that the applicant is just useless and didn't get their act together. Sometimes you get clarification during the process that said, you can't do it this way, you have to do it this way, and then you've got to go back, which we have to do, to all of our applicants that came in through FAMPO, TWRC, and say, no, these economic development sites do not qualify, they shouldn't qualify, the interpretation is this other way, you need to go and get these economic development sites. And thankfully, OIB and VDOT and the local district helped us to fix that so that those projects at the last minute got sorted. But let's not pretend that there was this failure of all these applicants to actually comply. There are some very high technical details that get interpreted sometimes during the course of the process. Does it mean this or does it mean that? And in this particular case, with the distance of the economic development sites to your application, give me one little example and I'll elaborate any further. There was this thing, and we had to run around trying to find it out. It's not because we didn't do it right, but because there was this non-clarity.
Sure, all right, Mr. Kelly and then Ms. Berry.
I'll agree. But I understand what you're saying. But again, going back a few years, and Laura was sitting around this table when we talked about these things. My biggest concern of going through a lot of this stuff was we didn't know what we're looking at. We know what projects are important to King George. We know what projects are important to all our regions and where they do and how they fit in and why we do those projects. And all of a sudden now the focus is on the process and not on what are the needed projects. That's one that drives me nuts. And when I have my FAMPO executive director going, well, we don't know how to properly make sure our scores are going to be higher, what projects to bring forward. What was my first thing I said when we went down this road? We're going to take our focus off what we need, and we're going to start playing the numbers game on getting things to fit the process to fund projects instead of keeping the focus on what the heck do we need in this region to build. And some of it is complicated and messy and is overly expensive and everything else like that. But that doesn't detract from the fact that they are important projects in this region. Process is important, I'm not saying it's not, but sometimes we spend a hell of a lot more time playing with process and focusing on process and losing the focus of what we're trying to do, which is outcome, which is to make sure people know, not put in 50 sheets of paper and make sure you have this box checked, that box checked, and that box checked. You're focusing on outcomes, not on process. I think we've lost that. I think we've lost our vision of what are we trying to build a region, because now I just heard from executive director, we don't know, we're gonna have to have a hard time trying to figure out which one of our projects are gonna score high enough to get funded. And those are the projects we need to bring forward because we're gonna be limited in the number of slots we get. What happened to this project is critically important for the region, we gotta do everything we can to get it funded. We stopped that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Gary.
So I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. The percentages that we're talking about is for the 90% pre-application and the 50%. That's statewide?
Yes.
Okay. I just wonder if there would be a way to allow for, and this, obviously, I can't tell you how to do your job, but just my idea. It would be really cool if we could have more opportunities for applications if we are showing that we're doing them thoroughly and not requiring as much staff support time. So just a thought to put out there to me. I don't know how we do here in relation to the rest of the state, but I feel like that's.
The tech quite strongly in the chair, and they're not all here tonight, so forgive me talking, it's just me in my opinion, but the tech is concerned about this. And so I'm trying to give voice to their opinions collectively by sort of summarizing. And the tech feels that we should really encourage the state to hire the staff that they need to help with this process, if the state wants to have such a complicated process. Right? The state has collectively designed this process with lots of detail you have to supply for every project. It is objective, so I'm not saying we should not have an objective process, but the tech feels that we should encourage the state to hire staff, but they need to be able to get these projects rather than just cut them to like half the number of applications that we used to have. Because if we only get 2, it's going to be really hard to decide which 2 to send forward. Or maybe 3, I don't know. As you pointed out, it's not decided, but the proposal was.
Ms. Bobby.
So I guess when I do anything statewide, knowing that our state is very diverse and you have a lot of rural areas, and some that are much more rural than King George and what you described, Annie, and I appreciated your perspective there as well. But is it the vast majority of them are in like what Annie, described? And the bigger regions have the more technical assistance? I feel like we're hanging our hat on a number with really not enough data to really, it says 50% of submitted, and I guess VDOT could tell us that's everybody, right? Hampton Roads.
That's the statewide statistic that they get out for these, based on the whole state.
But no details about
But-
the region. I think.
Right.
That came at a different meeting, so when we got in January, when they presented round 5, they said these are the number of applications that we received, these are the ones that were screened out. I don't remember Fredericksburg district if we had any screened out, so all of our applications were accepted.
Yeah.
And they were decent, and with the crows fly, the buffer issue, Spotsylvania brought that to our attention, and Spotsy got every one of their applications in through Smart Scale.
Yeah,
So it's hard to say, oh, it's a broken system, and here it's a broken system, when they figured it out.
no, but that messes up that percentage because now they're all being
But
up to date and in on time if we didn't discover this. And in fact, they only notified us of the problem after the due date. So the point is that we could have pushed that percentage up if we didn't have this misinterpretation issue.
So the only thing I will also say is this is based on one presentation. So we got another presentation last week that went into the factors, and one of the big factors that OEP is seeing is causing this. And in July, we will have a work session. So this is the beginning of the process, and yes, continue to bring these things up. But it's not a secret. There are changes coming to the way HPP money is being allocated, and it is going to affect the MPO of PDCs. Not necessarily as much the counties, because if you submit it as a county, we fund that first through district grant money. So as long as it's submitted by a county or a city, you qualify for district grant money first. HPP is changing. That is true.
I don't think, just from the point of view of the TAC members, the however many there are, and Michelle's also one, I don't think anybody was concerned about the fact that changes need to happen. And no one said don't change anything. I think the concern is about the number of slots.
So I don't think that's gonna be your biggest problem. I think the biggest problem is if when you look at how the projects were submitted and looking at them coming from it, now I was here. I remember this conversation, right? When we started this HB2 nonsense, right? I remember it. I was here. I was a member. That's probably why I'm here now, because I was very loud that this is a broken system. When you look at it from a CTV perspective and you begin to look at projects and you look at the types of money that they're qualified for, you begin to understand the nuances between if a PDC MPO submits it and if a locality submits it. And as a supervisor and as a member of FAMPO and GWRC, I didn't know those nuances. It was not until I sat at the table and received the presentation, probably one of my 4th or 5th meeting on the CTV, and I see a project coming underfunded and they say it has to go to HPP because the PDC submitted it. And I thought, what a nuance that I never knew that. Nobody, it was not clear, right? So the least of your concern is the number of projects. We do need to focus on better projects. And from an MPO and a PDC perspective, they need to very closely align to state priorities. HPP is state priority money. So there are some regional things in there, and we can make sure that through VTrans, we identify what those regional things are. But if they're not in there, it's going to be very hard to qualify. So let's focus on making sure VTrans is good, because CTV is also looking at that, as well as making sure that we understand the types of money and what's really going on here. This number of projects thing is not it.
Well, I think unfortunately, that is also not completely the full picture. I'm afraid to say that we're good friends, but I would have to contradict you. We have been told that the state is shutting down the reevaluation and the workshops on doing a reevaluation of the V-Trans needs. The word has come on from on high. No. We don't want MBOs to now come and mess with the V-Trans needs system, because we were promised workshops. They've been cancelled. We've been told we don't actually want your opinion right now. Not in those words, but that's basically what's been done. We're not going to get a chance to review the V-Trans needs. We've now been cut out of the system. And that is, go back to my original point, that is the proposal before you, and it's the proposal we were given. And our reaction is to say, we're concerned about the slots because we're going to have to guess a lot better than we guessed in the past. So, I mean, I do hear that the different opinions, and I understand I don't know everything personally about all of this, so I buy that. I'm happy to learn. But I still don't hear anything that guarantees me that we're not going to have the slots reduced. And if that happens, we have to guess. I'm going to have to go to Stafford and say, sorry, all of your projects don't work to me. I'm not putting any of them in. I'm going to put them in from the city of Pennsylvania because I only get 2 slots.
That's the problem the CTV members have, and actually Richmond brought up very specifically, where PDCs and MPOs are not looking at a regional project, not saying, hey, we need a bridge over the Rappahannock, right? Another bridge. They're saying, let's use this as an extension of now this county gets more projects, this county gets more projects. And so what was seen is intended to be large statewide projects are these small projects that, and truthfully, looking at our list this year, there were several projects that GWRC and FAMPO put on that would have been funded through the VGP program anyways. They scored high enough. So that's the problem they're getting at, and wait until October. October is, we got the thing, I'm looking at it right now. October is when CTV will receive our final recommendations.
So this actually does bring up, you brought up an interesting point, and something that, so I spoke with one, our local TAC member, like Greg, to get a little bit of an idea of the TAC meeting. And I brought up an additional risk, and I think you actually might have stressed it as a feature, not a bug, in that you're actually hoping that they are larger projects that are submitted. And to me, that's actually a bit of a risk in the sense that there is now an inherent bias toward large projects, which in terms of price tag and engineering are all going to be surface transportation projects, not necessarily transit. And I'm concerned that this change in process will also lead to an implicit bias in the submission of only, or at least to a much higher degree of surface transportation projects, which is something that also tends to go against what I'm hearing from VDOT in terms of state priorities. And so to me, it seems like a little bit of a catch-22,
It's all
or at least inconsistent.
No, because they're also, in addition to changing all these things, part of that is creating criteria of what can actually qualify for submission. And in the June presentation, they had criteria that were on there. See if I can find it, but they went into all this at the June meeting, so I would look up the June meeting and then attend in July, where we will have our work session as a CTB, where you will hear the open dialogue. Virginia Beach or Hampton Roads District makes some very valid points in some of the things that they're seeing. Richmond District as well brought up some points, although he has now come off, did leave his points. And so we will get into that, but they are creating criteria, which includes a transit, some form of transit, that actually we in the rural areas, because most of the district is rural, are concerned about. We are concerned actually that some of the changes could benefit the other localities, the ones with transit. So it's a balancing act. It's very complicated. I would say attend in July, attend our meetings in July, and then watch the October CTV meeting, or come to the October CTV meeting, which I believe is in Richmond. Come and attend it where OIP will present their entire case. And I'm also happy to ask Brooke Jackson and her folks to come and sit down with everybody. And we can do a smaller presentation to hear some of this. But yeah, we're listening. You know, I'm not just gonna let things happen without it. In the rural,
All right, so
Virginia would never let transit be left out.
no, I hear you. I don't want to be left out either, and then that's the concern is the number of projects. Well, you said there. Let me bring it back to the GWRC and FAMPO members. If there are any questions about the resolution in front of us, 2314, if you are GWRC, 2335, if you are FAMPO, you want to see if there's any questions, concerns, edits, amendments, anything like that, or if there are any motions to approve. Oh, did you have a seat? There you are. Oh, yeah. Yes, Yes, Ms.
Do
Bond.
we still have quorum for GWRC? I've seen people leave.
Did that? Oh. Right.
I think I saw Darren leave.
Well, so quick show of hands. Quick show of hands for who GWRC. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6. Nope. Okay. Any FAMPO members?
I don't think people realized how important it was that they stay. They didn't realize that we were voting on the resolution.
It's not.
Ginger, are you still online?
It says that.
Yes, I am.
Kathy is online.
Oh.
Yes.
6. Oh, but we have to have 6 in the room, don't we?
Six in the room. Get seated with Gerald.
Already under 2.
Yeah, we need
Needs one from
any other locality, actually, besides the city. Well, no, yeah.
Stafford alternate.
Pam and Tom Cohen.
Yeah, you're not considered an alternate for GWRC. Okay.
This is Crystal. I'm online for Stafford for FAMPO.
Thanks, Crystal.
And I might be an alternate for GWRC, but I don't remember. If you guys want to check your roll, then maybe I could count for quorum for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it won't count toward quorum, but I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So at least, okay, so on the FAMPO side, I'm at least gonna ask for any sort of questions, comments, edits, or ask for a motion to approve.
Which are asking us to resubmit, reevaluate our request for the review.
And the numbers.
Corruption and non-operation. Overall, flat.
Saying. I don't like it.
What?
I don't like it, but I understand the reason.
If there is no motion, then, well,
Laura point, we need to say, talk about, we can change criteria.
We'll have an opportunity to make additional comments if you're able to go to the CTB they have, and it's going to be in Fredericksburg. I don't have the venue. Fred Vince, yeah.
17,
So
18.
the 19th in the morning at 8:30, the meeting starts, and the first item on the agenda is public comment.
So you will want to attend the workshop, the Smart Scale workshop on the 19th and begins after we do our action. So that is part of it, and then if we need to, we'll go into the 20th. But the calendar presented by OAP this last week was October is when they will present their final recommendations. So you could wait to do any comments, put all your comments together until October.
We have start the next round by September. So we've already asked our localities and others to submit projects that they think are regional projects. For us to start the process and beat up district wants us to give them the list. Even if it's September or October, we have to start getting you the names of the projects. Yeah, so by then, we have to have from our localities projects for next round. So it's difficult for us because this is what happened last time is on the fly, while the process was already in motion, we had to change the way we did economic development, for example. It's a difficult process.
all right, so at this time, Ms. Bonfield is going to ask you to reopen contact Mr. English.
No, I called him twice. He must be in the storm. That's not like him not to pick up. And I texted him and said, we need to call back to him.
Probably a trial.
Okay, thank you.
If you wish to, we would proceed with a FAMPO one if there's interest.
But I also say I'm now going to ask for a motion for item 2335.
Yeah, that's the FAMPO.
Well,
Is there, is there a method to do this? I don't think so. Right? So as we were putting,
the letter.
yeah, so I make a motion to, send the 2335.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Question. You are correct. I'm just, it's interesting that we put it in the form of a resolution like this, and normally it's just we direct the chairman to send a letter to the CTB saying, these are our concerns, please don't do it. Why have it decided to put in the full form of resolution?
We have both in the pack. We've got a resolution and a letter.
So send a letter.
You can do either one or both or none. I mean, I don't know about sharing information with you, and you all decide what to do.
So can we do?
We can all, we can also, if someone wants to amend the motion, that is also enough.
Will you pull your motion?
I'll pull my motion, yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we send the letter that was in here referenced under GWRC, but it be from FAMPO.
There's one for FAMPO and one for GWRC, and they're identical and they're both in the
Oh,
pack.
okay.
Well, you can't do that as a.
Oh, I already.
Can't do, she can.
Yeah.
No, sorry. You can, yes, no, I forgot that you already rescinded it.
Yeah,
That was,
I did.
that was my mistake. All right,
The only question, and it might be worth doing to your point, is a reminder that we start the process. And we would rather have an answer sooner rather than later on what CP is doing, as opposed to just letting this play out. I think it would be worthwhile to make that point.
You want to add to the letter?
And it's another thing, we are expected to submit applications by this date, yet you're not going to give us a decision till October.
so Mr. President, the friendly amendment, you got the amendment. Thank you. Is the second accept the amendment? All right. Yeah,
We've seen that.
sample letters dated July 1st, for your signature as fair of the organization, so that's now.
We will happily sort that out in the week. If you approve the language, you're going to later on choose the new chair of FAMPO. We'll ask the new chair to sign it, and we'll add the sentence, so we can sort that out at the staff level. But you need to make the decision or not.
And what I think, yes, to Laura's point, because of that, this all comes down to, we're not going to have the information we need to move forward, because we're also looking at changes in schooling projects. So we kind of work that all in there, just to a statement that basically says, a lot of decisions that the CPD is not, right now, is not planning to make until after we have to submit and we would prefer to have.
Not submitting applications and pre-applications before that, you're just submitting your initial ideas to the district. Just to be clear on that. Not the pre-application, the application, it's just
Yeah, but we're,
giving the district an idea of what you want to do.
here's where I'm coming from myself, and this has always been a little bit of my beef with the way we do things. I understand your staff works hard and everything else like that. State goes, well, we can do this and we can do that. We don't want this being done on staff and waste that time yet. We have to do it. It's localities. So we're expected to jump through hoops that frankly state kind of eliminates anything that just makes schools and they need to make them to change things as they want to. So you guys come in here regularly, and I didn't say I'm trying to do, we need this change right now. You got to vote on it tonight. Well, and we have to do it. Whereas we, as an MPO, don't have the rights to do those things. You would want us to fix the wall shit us. We try to do some of those things that you guys do on a regular basis. We buy some localities. So I don't think it's any way a problem for us to say, hey, you're now asking us to start doing a large amount of work, which you're going to change rules as the game moves forward. And that's not something that we really appreciate.
No, I understand. It's, but these are project ideas that your staff is coming up with. The lion's share of the work is all done at the district.
Applications that are being
And but it's still, what we are having to do, each project we bring forward, you have to, we have this, we started, we are getting it all together. Yes, it's pre-application, but we're not going to do something forward that we're not already started to work on to make it full
We
out.
already have to start guessing which one is going to be successful.
Well, guessing is not a good word again, because you're supposed to be developing what are your regional priorities for transportation, not guessing anything.
No, that is
It's
true.
to be
That's
developing
true.
regional priorities for transportation. I'm trying to guess what a good transportation project would be.
That is true, but the big but is we have to tweak those projects to fit with your criteria, with the OIB criteria, otherwise they won't get funded. So it's not like the other projects. It's like you've got to think about this project and think carefully about how is it going to get money for economic development? How is it going to get money for safety? How is it going to get, well, not money, points. And points on the involved.
Project that would be all those tenants and the V-Trans and has a safety need and all those, it would.
I think we want,
Like the ones that have scored well for the region already in all of our localities. In the last.
All right, hold on, I'm gonna recognize some stuff.
So, and I realize I'm not on FAMPO, but I just want to point out, I do really like the wording in this letter compared to the resolution. It does say we are in full support of dedicating additional funding to increase VDOT staff resources to support smart scale application preparations and to assist localities. I really like that, but the bigger picture here is folks at this table next year with the General Assembly need to lobby our state level legislators for more money for VDOT. If this is our need and we're saying this is our need and we know it's a need, then we also need to follow up on that.
That's a very good point.
And I won't be here next year, but I'm counting on the rest of you to do so. Thank you.
Ms. Bonky.
So we are discussing our legislative priorities at our board meeting tomorrow between 5 and 6 o'clock. So Monica, Crystal and I will make sure that that is on there.
Thank you. Excellent. Mr. Keller.
Just one last point on that, I guess you gotta get it out because it's been such a frustrating. We talk about, projects that this region want. I would just point out, one, because we don't have money to leverage, we lose a lot of our bigger projects. So that's one thing when we say we're trying to keep our focus on region needs. We're already behind the 8 ball there. Two, and again, this criteria has not changed significantly enough. Just a reminder that 2 projects on Interstate 95, which were considered of national importance, scored 182 and 186 out of 230 projects in the first round smart scale, and had been pulled out by the CPB to fund, and the Northern Park project was not a smart scale project. So when we talk about priorities of the regions and getting funded, that's within the current system, that does not necessarily come together.
Well, if that's a project, let VDOT staff know now. You want 95 funded, tell them tomorrow. That's perfect.
All right.
We spent a lot of years on that, me too.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second with the amendment. So just as a reminder, we are considering the letter only from 2335 from the FAMPO perspective. So at this time, unless there's any further questions or comments concerning the item on the floor, I will call for a vote.
Well, with the addition of the paragraph.
Yeah, we have as amended, Yes. Yes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Abstain.
Yes, of course, we just thank you. Yes. Yes, before we adjourn GWRC, please.
Just real quickly, because the door was opened on several of these items, from the rural perspective, the GWRC transportation perspective. And we don't get the honor of having the CTV member for our GWRC meetings a lot. I want to take this opportunity. Ms. Kupka was exactly right about the rural counties needing the most assistance because, our rural counties are not near the rural counties in other parts of the Commonwealth. The PDCs have been working on the rural grant program from VDOT where we receive $58,000 a year for assistance to the rural program. My understanding is that has never been increased since the inception. At the very least, not in the last 20 years. Smart scale has been initiated during that time. Inflation has occurred during that time. That 58,000 has remained constant. That's what we work off of to fund Caroline and King George.
And it's not enough.
And it is not enough. We would love a discussion to begin to address that because the duties, responsibilities, the types of projects. When that grant was during its inception, nobody was really planning for bike ped and that kind of stuff. It's been a long time. So I take this opportunity to say, if you heard some of the comments earlier for the rural section, the MPOs have seen increases almost every year, but the rural programs have never seen an increase. Just throw that out there for future discussion.
I'll get on your calendar.
Thank you.
I'll come to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pelosi. And if there is if there's nothing more for GWRC, then the GWRC meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Yes. All right. We'll take a 2-minute recess to just kind of settle back.
That's what you do all day.
I know, man. So
All right, friends,
disagree sometimes. Sometimes we become enemies, but we disagree on policy. But this is policy.
Maybe I can.
Well, I agree with you on
I
lots.
think you're pretty good, so I can take.
No, I agree. I personally agree with you on lots of things, but not necessarily this one, but. Being my enemies, we just.
So my counterperson, right, I mean, our sister city, and the next problem, they go, what's the solution? And then they find the resources and they do it. We start with, this is all we got in budget. And then we do projects and carry things over 5 years and have the same problem for the next 5 years.
Like the side of what?
Others can do it and do it right, and you continue to.
Hey, Brandon, how are you? Good. We'll get there. All right, we needed rain, we're gonna get this storm.
It's going to our south in the community, George, Carolina, but I that's the fine.
But it's going to King George and Carolina.
In Georgia, Carolina.
Okay.
Well, we put that into the public.
Yeah. We get rain.
Originally, you guys were gonna get hit pretty hard. That's what our EOC said earlier today. Hey, but we beat that something to death, didn't we?
Just maybe. All right, I'm gonna give it one more minute.
When I tell you with the keep. Keeping.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we'll make sure that.
It's our, there it's gonna be located.
Can we do a quick online check? I just want to make sure that folks online are still able to hear us.
Is Jake on there? Is Jake online?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I'm on here, Lori.
Jay, you want to be.
All right. Okay, just want to make sure that I'm gonna get everybody. Okay. All right. All right, we will now resume the FAMPO meeting. Yes, we have quorum. At this time, I will ask for a motion to approve the June 26th policy committee agenda.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Moving on to public involvement, comments and questions from members of the public are welcome at this time. Staff will also read comments submitted by the public prior to the meeting. I also just want to add, Mr. Alston, you can remind our public speakers the time limit for comments.
Yes, you can personally speak up for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. At this time, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Please.
Friend Marcus, I just want to thank you. That's big difference.
I think you made it under the. Thank you, Ms. Lord. All right. And do we have anyone else from the public who wishes to speak at this time?
I'm back now.
All right. Do we have any comments that are here to be read?
Yes, I have a written comment from Jane Leeds. I wish to address the fact that I, along with others who are physically challenged that are interested in attending this committee meeting in person, are unable to do so. Why? Because there is no viable, meaningful, accessible, or desirable public transit available during the hours that the meeting is held. One can possibly arrive at the meeting, but it is unlikely that they can return home via the same method. There are two existing reasons for this circumstance. One, there are no audible signals in the central region. One cannot safely cross the road to access the bus stop or go to or return home if one is visually impaired. Two, the buses do not run after 8 p.m. Even if they did, most communities do not have contiguous sidewalks for those who have to walk with a service dog or those who ride wheelchairs to access their home safely. Yet the policy committee's priorities are inherently focused almost exclusively on providing roads, bridges, and ramps to single drivers who clog our roads. To permit our limited resources to enable those drivers, but not those who use public transit or walkways. That makes no sense. She used a C in PS. Not requiring contiguous sidewalks and audible signals at the public transit station Amtrak stations, and the VRE is mean-spirited at best. Plenty of transportation needs to require that all parties, able-bodied and those who are challenged, be equally considered. The token and sometimes meaningless efforts by the committee are often a waste of precious resources. People who are physically and financially challenged are guaranteed the same rights by our Constitution, state and federal, which are not just suggestions, but required by law. At the last meeting, an unidentified speaker on Street Text, she reads Street Text, said, public transit is great, but I don't use it. I have to wonder how that person made a comment a valid one. How can one judge something they admittedly don't use? Has that person ever had to use it on even an occasional basis to justify their comment? I can tell you from firsthand experience as an expert consumer of public transit who has used it on both coasts and most major cities that public transit in Central Virginia is not great. It is one of the worst systems I've ever encountered. Without my assessment, then give me your car keys for a week and try to accomplish all you need to do using public transit. You will get your keys back, but I never will. The day will come when many of you will no longer be able to drive, some sooner than you think. My day arrived when I was 47 years old, not 67, 77, or older. Give that some thought. It's not a good day when your car leaves without you and it is not being stolen when there isn't any viable, accessible, meaningful alternative. From Jane Leeds, public advocate for the physically and financially challenged.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we will ask for approval of the consent agenda.
I do ask that we pull, C and E.
Mr. Kelly, would you like to make a motion? That's fine. All right, we have a motion for consent agenda items A, B, and D, pulling C and E. You accept the?
Yes.
We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Moving on to item 7C, the resolution adopting the fiscal year 2024 UPWP.
Or I assume you just want to vote against these.
Well, what I'm trying to do is be consistent with what we did before. So for consistency purposes, because C has is $685K for the river cross study. And then of course E is the study. So for consistency purposes, I think it's important that we vote on those separately.
And what I'll do is I'll move both C and D together and then consider when it's one vote. I'll move resolutions C and E on consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second for items 2324 and 2326. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. Yeah. I didn't change.
Well,
Case online.
Yes, I oppose.
all right. Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Sorry.
No, thank you. No, want to make sure we accommodate. All right. All right. Moving on now to the FAMPO administrator report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to do this quickly in some time. We haven't had an administrative report for a very long time, so like 4 months, I think. Connor, if you can just pull that up. It's not a very long report. Next slide. It is the end of our fiscal year. So what I typically try to do is just say, well, what did we do for a year, right? Did we achieve anything? So I'm going to do FY23 in review very quickly. Our policies and vision and future direction. Just some high level stuff. So what did we do? Funding. Smart scale. Well, we completed 10 regional project pre-applications and 8 final applications. 5 and 4 for FAMPO and 5 and 4 for GWRC. And you saw a number of those were funded. That brings a larger amount of dollars into our region, which we're very happy about. So, and we have said publicly before, and I'll say it again, we express our thanks to VDOT for the assistance with doing things like cost estimates and engineering drawings and so on. And we're also grateful to the CTP for supporting us with the funding. We also received $96,000 grant for the Safe Streets and Roads project to develop a safety action plan. And we've worked with the CTP and VDOT and FAMPO committees to, it's mainly feed on FAMPO. To allocate the STGB, Service Transportation Block Grant, and CMAP, and also the new carbon reduction funds. You all voted that through at your last meeting, and it's one of the larger amounts of money that we can do for projects since I've been here. Public outreach, we've done a lot of public outreach. We've had several meetings just for public outreach, public hearings regarding various multimodal transportation projects. The air quality conformity process, which is public related matters. We've completed numerous public comment periods. One of our former staff said to me the other day, wow, you have a public hearing and a public comment period on every damn piece of paper these days. You're going crazy with your public comments. So, well, that's a good thing, right? We're telling the public what we're doing and they're participating like never before. And if you don't believe that, the next line, we've had 4 surveys in the financial year of public opinion. And those, I think all 4 of them, if I'm not mistaken, got more public votes and comments than any surveys we did before this financial year. I thought it was great when we did the 2021 Transportation Improvement Survey and we got 1,260 members of the public to participate. We're now getting sometimes 2,000 people commenting on these surveys. So there is a great increase in public interest on various topics, and we think that's a great improvement. Next slide. Studies and workshops. So the freight summit was a great step forward. We did not have a relationship, to be honest, with the freight community in this region in recent years. And we now have at least something on the books. We've met with a bunch of freight operators. We've had a workshop with them. We've produced a report, which we think is a good one. And it's shown us what's going on in the region and taught us that we have a freight bottleneck that we can realize and a bunch of other things in the region. We completed the East-West Mobility Study, phase 1, phase 2. You adopted the transit report and the roadway report. That included about 20 projects, right? And each jurisdiction will decide which of those projects they want to proceed with and which they don't, or which they might want to in the future. But that's 20 projects you've got to pick from for your future funding applications. We then did the BCR Trail Bridge and Tunnel Study. There was funding allocated to this and no progress on it. So we decided we're going to get this done, spend the money, do the study, and then at least we have the answers. Whether we decide to actually construct the tunnel and the 2 bridges is up to the jurisdictions again. But now we have a design for a tunnel, we have a design for 2 bridges, and we're just finishing that off now with some outstanding documents that are needed. We completed the river crossing research report, which you adopted tonight. Then federal and state regulatory requirements. There are numerous. Stephen and Michelle and others will tell you about almost every month there's another document we have to complete because it's a federal or a state requirement, and we do those, right? And that keeps us honest, it keeps us transparent, it keeps us accountable, and we've done all of those. Just to mention 2 of them, the FAMPO tip, you're going to, or you just adopted tonight, the new FAMPO tip that covers the years 2024 to 2027. That's a federal requirement. And remember, that document limits funding that can be spent on projects. If the project is not in that document, nobody's allowed to write checks. It's an important document. So any federal money, if it's not in there, so you can, theoretically, if you want to be me, you could actually stop a project by refusing to put it in there. We've not done that, but that's the importance of that document. And then the congestion management process, because we have the transportation management area in Stafford, we have to do this congestion management process to monitor congestion in our region, and we do that. And quarterly, we put on our website the results of where the congestion is on the major routes for you to look at. Next slide. Excuse me, I'm going to try. I want to see some vision. So this is something we've been working on. We haven't got a vision. We've been working towards a vision. So we continue to monitor transportation in our region, all modes of transportation post-pandemic. We look at the congestion out on the roads, we look at the transit ridership, etc. Keep our fingers on what's going on. Next thing we do is I've been working with Coley and our staff and yourselves on a FAMPO vision. We're not there yet, but we made some strides towards that, right? We did the vision survey. You all commented on it, and our 4 FAMPO committees commented, and some of you were surprised at the results, because it wasn't perhaps your personal kind of view that was always the majority. So we did that. We then did a conceptual workshop, remember? A facilitator came, met with you, talked through the problems and the solutions and options. We had presentations by the Department of Rail Public Transportation, by the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, by Bob Schneider for PRTC. Tonight, hopefully you're going to discuss regional growth and look at these maps. And discuss the regional priorities. What should the priorities be? Because we're trying to build this vision. And then look at future funding. How do we fund the vision? How do we fund the projects in future if we're going to need more money? And we'll get to that in a moment. And then we want to align our policies and our funding to that vision. Like once you've got an idea of what the vision should be, we can then work on lining these things all up so that it's not, as was said earlier, me and my little county and my little project, right? It's what is the regional vision? How do we line up the funding? How do we line up the priorities? How do we line up the projects to support future vision? And then I just made this point, a shotgun approach to planning doesn't achieve good results. If you just aim at anything around and shoot, let's build a bike path, let's build a road, let's fly, there has to be some coordination. Otherwise, it's just a random process of give me my sidewalk. Next slide. State policies. So we have submitted suggestions and requests, and we did another one tonight to improve smart scale outcomes. We worked for improvements in the V-Trans needs. We did have discussion with the head of OIP, and we did make our comments known about freight metrics within the V-Trans needs, and they are listening to us. You can attend the CTB, well, we have attended the spring CTB meetings several years in a row, and numbers of you made comments. And then this is the meeting that Laura was talking about earlier. The CTB meetings will be hosted in Fredericksburg, and the action meetings on the 19th of July at 8:30 a.m. And the venue was, please remind me again,
Frednet Stadium.
the Frednet Stadium.
I don't think you can speak on a 19th, what day is that?
That's the Tuesday, the 18th is the workshop.
Okay.
So the 19th.
So 19th is the meeting, public comment period. So I encourage you to go, because that's where you can say what you want, and other members will listen. Don't embarrass our region, like I sometimes do, but, you know, please go, please speak, please make it work, whatever you want. Even if you disagree with me or you disagree with anyone else, you say what you feel. Next slide. Policy. Policy will flow out of the vision. It's no good deciding all the policies and then chop out the vision. People try and get the vision. So these are examples of policies. Like them, shoot them down, whatever. People want to travel, and you've seen this slide before, but you've probably forgotten. A year ago, you saw this slide from me. Our role is to facilitate efficient movement and encourage better choices and options for travel. I don't know whether you like that or not, but that's what we suggested a year ago. You think about it. Everyone driving a car alone at the same time on a limited number of roads, together with all the freight traffic, is not a sustainable future because there's not enough road traffic for everybody. So we could encourage multimodal options. We could change development patterns. These are 2 levers you can use to help solve the congestion problem. Getting more out of the existing infrastructure, or better use of US1. The asphalt is laid. Can we move more cars per hour on that asphalt with some changes, right? And we've submitted suggestions to the secretary, and we get back on secretary, but we did try. Better use of VRE, better use of CSX, better use of Amtrak. We try to increase the throughput and save our roads. We need a future-proof FAMPO by identifying future trends and adjusting to prepare for them. Electric vehicles, how are we going to accommodate those? Rapidly growing population, you're going to see that on the maps. Modernizing the transit and TDM networks. You heard tonight complaints about the transit system isn't working for some people who have disabilities. Building a selected number of new roads or connections where we need them, right? Those are the policies we want to implement. Next slide. What am I aiming to do with FAMPO? I was going to change that because of the I in there. Irritated me today when I was putting this together, but I thought I want to catch you up and see if you think you've seen the slide before, because you have. 1 year ago in this room, I presented this and I said, this is what I'm trying to achieve, because you asked me, what are we trying to do in FAMPO? Give us an idea. So I put this together and I showed it to you. Develop a vision, develop a policy to implement the vision, conduct the studies and surveys to identify the projects to implement the vision, source federal, state, local, and private funding to implement that vision, foster cooperation between stakeholders to implement that vision, retain the staff, complement, develop the process, and work within the laws and regulations. That's what I told you a year ago, and I've tried to, together with all of our staff, together with you, together with the jurisdictions, achieve that. And I think we have a really good working relationship now. 3 years ago when I arrived, it wasn't so good. We can all agree with that. But I think right now, I mean, we disagreed tonight, but there wasn't a shouting match. We just said, no, I don't agree, right? We can still disagree and be friends. Next slide. Rail, this is just an announcement. You've seen this probably. I was going to share this 3 months ago, but we had to pull my report because of the nature of the meeting. But run-through trains have now been agreed to by Virginia and Maryland. A run-through train means the train can start in one state, cross into the other state, and both states have agreed to make the technology compatible and the scheduling so that the trains can move. So the first MARC train came into Virginia a month ago, 2 months ago, I think, because they're working on this agreement. It's now agreed that MARC trains will come into Alexandria and Virginia, and BRE trains will be allowed to go into Maryland. And now we can build up the technology, the train sets, the signaling system, all that to make it compatible. It's already agreed, and I don't think we talked about it. Next slide. Land use and zoning. This is a question I have for the policy committee because I don't know the answer. It's something we have to work out together. Federal law is increasingly saying MPOs must try to align land use and transportation. Right. However, the legislation doesn't explain how to do it. My question to you is, how do we do that? Because we at FAMPO are concerned with regional transportation needs and projects and development. We don't have any legislative authority to mess with zoning and density and land use and all of those things. But the feds are starting to say, hey, you better start getting this to happen. So I don't know the answer, but I'd like to work with you on finding the answer. What is the most appropriate way to do that? I don't know, but clearly the move federally is to try to link new housing with roads, with buses, with whatever else, right? How do we do that without making a law? I don't quite know. Maybe through encouraging, maybe I have to buy more beer for zoning people or something. I don't know what the method is, but somehow we must work out a method. Next slide. That's the final slide. These are the people who served the FAMPO Policy Committee for the last year, and I just want to thank them for my picture. But I just want to thank Becky, Carrie, John, Ryder, Connor, who's behind the computer, Coley, who does the outreach for us. Just my thanks to them for all they've done. That's my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ollis. And I want to echo the thanks to FAMPO staff over the past year. I think we have done a lot of things, and you are to be commended for what we've done. So thank you. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to the action and discussion items. Item 9A is reappointing the at-large CTAC members. I will note for this that all of these CTAC members are asking for reappointment, and there is no conflicting number between the number of appointments and the number of available slots. I still believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we have 2 available slots, even if all of these members are reappointed. Is that correct? Cole's nodding.
Sure.
Okay.
We have a shortage, not an excess.
Yes. So there is no, if this person gets on, it leaves someone else.
One motion.
Please.
I'll take one motion to approve resolutions 23, 31, 32, 33, and 34.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Moving on to the FAMPO vision plan, number one, GWRC zoning and future land use compiled map.
We have 3 maps which I want to put on the desk in front of you. They're up here on the wall. They'll be on the desk, on the table in front of you, and they'll also be on the screen. So if you give me those, Connor.
So we're gonna walk around, be able to take a look at.
You can look at them on the wall. The same 3 are going to be there in front of you on the table, and the same 3 are going to be on the slide. We're just giving you ease of access because it's not always easy to see.
No.
Well, it's the same way. Connor, this one, can you put this one here?
Yeah, sorry.
This one, and give me that one for the other. Since this one is on the wall, furthest from you.
That, here's your name tag thing.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. They're on the wall and they're in front of you, and Connor's going to explain them to you. This is Connor's first presentation, so be a little supportive. He's not here to stop the.
No heckling.
Off you go, Connor, explain them.
So I'll make it short because the whole point of this was to facilitate discussion. I remember back in the March meeting after the thing, you guys mentioned that you wanted to talk about. So essentially what I did was I went into all of the jurisdictions, GIS files, and I found like 5 of them. So for the first one, it's the zoning classification, and Spotsy, Fredericksburg, and Stafford all had about 30 different zoning ordinances, and I had to break them down into 11 different kind of classifications. So you're gonna have commercial, industrial, mixed use, agricultural, rural residential, suburban residential, urban residential, and then you have the planned mixed use, planned commercial, planned residential, and special overlay. So special overlay is just like parks, and then like the military bases. And the difference that, like one question I thought you guys might have is the planned development, and generally the planned development stuff just, it gives the area a greater degree of flexibility. And so this is the map we came up with, or that I came up with when collating all of those together.
It's this map here on the wall,
Yes.
or also this map here. It's the same map. We've just tried to position it closer to those so you can see it, and Connor's going to explain.
And then the white lines are just like the regional roadway network. And those should be delineated on the map, on the table there.
I don't think anyone's done this before, Connor. What we did was we had to try to get all of your jurisdictional codes to match, and they don't match. So what is urban? So Connor had to create that table he just showed you to try and say what is
Yeah.
rural residential, and then he created it. So now this is new. They put together here for you, or here for you, to show you where is mixed use, where is.
And so one of the things that you'll think is like, why is it rural residential versus agricultural versus suburban residential? And the easy way to do it was how many structures are allowed per acre within the area. So like you'll have like R4 in Spotsy and Fredericksburg, and that means you can put 4 structures on 1 acre. And then it's kind of flipped around for agricultural. So you can have 1 structure on 4 acres, right? And so that's how we delineated that. So that's going to be the zoning, and that's the current way it was done. And then this is just the secondary part. So for Stafford, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania, I was able to get the maps for the future land use from all of your comprehensive plans. And this is a smaller one, so we just broke this down into ag, commercial, industrial, mixed use, residential, and then special overlay.
That's the future, right? That's not the current, that's what you are planning for the future.
Right.
And it's on this map here, in front of me, the same map that's up here in the middle on the wall, and the map that Connor's about to show you now. That's the future according to you, according to your jurisdiction.
Right, so that was the breakdown, and here's the map as well. One thing I want to point out that it might come up, for Stafford County, all of that, like, it might all seem as like mixed use or multi-use. What that area is it's called like a planned development area. And so Stafford, within their comp plan, it's like they have that, it's like a targeted focused development area. And then within the plan, there's more specifics. But with what I was able to get for the data, it was not broken up within that region. But I mean, you know, generally like that middle area, you're gonna have schools, the airport, the Amazon fulfillment center. You have more development going in North Stafford, so you get the general idea. And then like for Spotsylvania County, it'll be like they have employment light, employment heavy. So some of it's mining, some of it's logging, and it'll be in blue area for industrial. And some of it's like warehouses. So that's generally what follows. So that's what I did. That's what you'll be able to see for the future land use, which is for 2035, and then the current zoning classifications. I just tossed this in, just because you guys have seen this before.
That's the Census
This
Bureau.
Census Bureau, important note that this is separate from zoning and from future land use plans because it's done by the census and they have different classifications for what they qualify as urban. So, but I think, you see some growth patterns from 2010 to 2020. And then this is not saying like they're exactly the same, but you get a somewhat of a general idea for what it could be. from
On the
2020.
right is your future plan, and on the left is what the Census Bureau says is happening.
Yes.
Next one.
So that's from the comp plan, yeah. And then we have this. This was using the East-West study. It was made by a prior FAMPO staff member who now is on the PAC, Matt Lehane. And this is for the 2050, that's the LRTP, correct?
Correct. That's the data from the LRTP. And I think if I can just point out something here, which Connor pointed out earlier, it almost seems like there's data missing here, but I think what happened is that the threshold is 2,500 numerical increase. So this might be 2,499, right? But there's definitely job increase here if you look at what's being developed now in Spotsylvania down US 1, right? So this will definitely also qualify for a job increase. It might be just under the 2.5, so it didn't pop out in the map. So it might be 2.4 or something, but there's definitely job growth also there. Right. And I think the jobs growth in the city of Fredericksburg is slightly overstated because I think there's an error in the LRTP numbers that we just found this week.
And so because we thought there was a small error in those numbers, we decided to just take the past, we wanted to see the population growth. We took the past 4 decennial census numbers for the 3 counties in the city, and then we just did a simple linear projection to find out like how much it's going to grow. So I believe the number is between now and 2060, it'll grow over 250,000 people.
The graphs show this.
Yeah. So here's the regional population projection. You see us now, we're sitting a little above 300,000, and then by 2060.
Sorry, Connor.
By 2060, with a linear projection, so it's just math, it's going to be a little below 600,000 people.
So this is important because we didn't make this up. That blue line is what happened. The dotted line is if you just project what happened into the future, and we didn't just take 2 censuses, if that's the word, we took 4, so that it's an honest attempt. Nobody massaged any numbers, nobody did fancy calculations, just a linear progression into the future, and it shows you that about 2063, the population will have doubled. That's what is happening. Okay, you can do things to slow it down or speed it up, but that's what is happening. And then the next slide, he breaks it down.
Yeah, and so by jurisdiction, both Stafford and Spotsylvania by 2060 go above 250,000 people, and the city sits a little above 40,000. Yeah, and so that concludes the presentation. I hope that the maps are helpful to you guys. Thank you.
So does everybody understand what's in front of you before we go to the next step? We want you to be happy that you know what we've done. You asked for this, spent a lot of time doing this. Connor, thank you. Did a lot of work on this.
Thank you.
This is what the current zoning is. That is the projected zoning that your jurisdictions have put out, right? We didn't make this up. We got off your comp plan and your GIS maps with that. We just put it together and matched it because it didn't match. So we have to.
Yeah, I tried to just make it regional.
We had to just make it regional. So that is what you say is the future. And if you look at that map, you can see down Route 3, lots of development's going to happen. Down Warrington Road or US 17, lots of development's going to happen. Northern stuff is going to get bigger. Then there's going to be infill. Do you know what I mean by infill? So more units are going to be built or mixed use, so it's gonna be some commercial, some residential, it's gonna fill the gap here, it's gonna fill in there, all the way down 95 US one, all the way into Caroline County. You're gonna have infill, and then, there's also some graded development here, and Spotley, you can see we're heading towards King George here. That's what you say is going to happen because you've already zoned for that. So we haven't.
We're not zoned for it yet.
What?
It's not zoned yet. It's within the comp plan.
It's in your comp plan of what you propose to zone.
Which is fluid and not set in stone. It's a living document.
You have the power to change this. You have the power to change this. We're just telling you what you have already proposed.
I hear you.
And let's just point out where the purple and the red and yellow tells you where the long range plan could actually going to have some growth. So that's the answer to the question that you asked us, the first question you asked us, which is, what is the current zoning? Where is the current new housing going to go? We could show you, we've identified the housing here as residential, this light green color. That's going to be residential. That's what residential is now. This is what you're proposing in your comp plan it's going to be. That's the answer to that question. And then that final map that shows you where the big growth areas are.
Council needs to see this map.
You're welcome to have copies. We can make them all available.
Yeah,
Yeah, we would.
it's very helpful. It's a lot to digest. Thank you.
It is a lot.
Jason? Mr. Chair, so this is great. Love it. I just want to make sure that you took into account Stafford's down zoning.
The down zoning?
Yes.
Was this the change when they switched from three, because they had the update and it's like now,
One house per 3 acres, now it's one house per 6 acres.
and y'all did the update when it went from the 2015, 2035 to the 2016, 2036 comp plan,
Yes.
right? I believe I did one of the changes, that had to be made was here, and I had gotten the shape file because you guys changed from, you had the targeted growth areas and priority focus areas within your comp plan, and then you changed that to what was called a PDA, I believe, a priority development area. So it looks the same in terms of what you're seeing on the map and the lines along 95, and you have that, what's called mixed use right now. We know it's not completely all like what is traditionally thought of as mixed use. But the shape file remains the same in terms of what you're going to see on the map within the column.
Okay, thank you.
So the next thing we've asked is, can we talk about priorities, which is, this is what is and what we think is coming. So what in light of that should our priorities be? And we never seem to make progress on this next step. So I don't succeed at everything. FAMPO staff don't succeed at everything, but we try. So fill up the next item.
Well, we only get one project for the whole region, so we gotta figure out where the
See?
best guess is.
Vision priorities, please click on that. Carly and I have been working on this because we're trying to get you to decide on these priorities, and we can't tell you, we can only give you information. It's you're the policy committee. Next slide. Carly's right here to help them. So the priorities are a balance of needs and resources. You bring your needs and your resources together and then you decide policy, right? Trade-offs are always required. Do we want more of this or more of that? I can't tell you what to do. I can just give you suggestions. What is the best balance between auto-centric travel in your car, like on your own in your car, and other modes? I don't know. Depends what you want. Depends what you think is going to work, right? What kind of transit is appropriate for local or long-distance commuting? I don't know. I can suggest things, but you need to decide because we're going to apply for funding or not, depending on what you want. What is our vision? What about transportation for those with special needs? You heard tonight a letter. We get nearly one a month from that same individual, and it's an important issue. What do we do for disabled folks? Got to spend money. Well, how much? What bigger priority is it? Where do we do it? Can't put audible signals everywhere, but maybe we can put them in one or two places to start with. How much do we fund sidewalks and shared use paths versus roads or transit? I don't know. You have to decide that. Next slide. Some things to consider. Do we support mobility as a service? Europe, mobility is a service, and so they fund all modes. That's why you see trams everywhere in those quaint little English, British and French and German towns, right? Thing that goes up the Matterhorn even, or whatever. They fund those things. Well, do we want to fund those? I don't know. You decide that. Is building more roadways a community service, or is it, what is it? How much of the complete streets means that the main roads should have cars, buses, or train, transit, bike path, a sidewalk. That's a complete street in that language, right? Do we want more of that? We're supposed to spend 2.5% of our stock time developing that. But how much of it do you want, right? We can draw nice plans, but if you don't vote for them, we wasted our time. On versus off-road pedestrian and bicycle facilities, infrastructure projects for improving non-driver access to public transportation. You heard about that in that letter. In the middle, major jurisdictional connections. When we raise these with the policy committee, some members love them, some members hate them. So we have to try and get a unified view of how we're going to go forward with these big projects. A river crossing or 2 or 3 or 7, Some people don't want any, some people want 3. Well, I don't know what the right number is. Bridges over the I-95. Do we need more or do we have sufficient? Some people say hard cross the I-95. Do we need more? I don't know. Those are big projects and you can't do them quickly. So you need to think about the overall vision and then decide how much effort, money, time to spend on these things. Interregional bus and passenger rail services. That's outside of the region, from here to other places and back. More or less. Expand EV infrastructure. Sometimes members think we should spend money on that and resources and assistance. Some think no. Well, what transportation projects support regional economic growth? We have a freight bottleneck. What is that doing to our economic growth? I don't know. But we know it's a problem. How do we deal with that when we can't fix the V-Trans needs, right? Hopefully we can, but I don't know. Then the last column, to what extent do we prioritize freight network versus other modes? Is the I-95 our problem or is it the state's problem to deal with? Should we spend our money or should we tell the state to spend their money? And will they? I don't know. We talk about these 2 new lanes we want from exit 130 to exit 126. Who should be paying for them? That's a policy question, right? Resiliency planning. How much of our resources do we invest in protecting our transportation infrastructure and systems from potential future hazards? Flooding. We had one roadway in Stafford County that had excessive flooding that we had to deal with. Are we going to see more? And then do we need more or less public involvement in decision making than we have now? Do we have enough? Do we have too little? Dare I even ask the question, is it too much? I don't want to get lynched. But anyway, there are just, instead of us telling you what your vision should be, which we don't think our job as staff, we're telling you these are the kinds of questions we think you should be asking and answering. And it's hard in a way because I have to push you to start to make tentative decisions, to start to say, hey, if this is what the future is going to look like, if those are going to be the growth nodes, how are we going to move people around? Which modes do we prioritize? In terms of prioritization, where do we spend our energy and our money? And I'll leave you with that. And then the last item on the agenda that we just smile of what it is, future funding. Maybe I should just put this one, do it as well, give you the big download, and then I can shut up for the rest of the meeting. And that is the last slides. Will you pull those up? It's a quick one. It's just future funding. I told you I'd come back to this topic now. So here it is. You got the first slide. I looked at the first slide.
The first one?
No, that's the vision. I need the next presentation. There, future funding. So once you see how the region's going to develop, and once you've started to talk about a vision, you've got to fund the vision. And next slide. This is about the funding. So this is what we did. We asked them to come talk about transit. We got the BPRA, we got the RPT, we got OmniRide to come and talk, and Fred was here to also discuss. We did the congestion workshop. We did the discussion of the vision with the high-level future concepts, which we're still talking about. And then we need to talk about the funding options. Next slide. So, smart scale funding projects with leveraged funding, local match, always do better. Right? If there's a bit that you put in from your county, it's going to score higher because there's a cost-benefit analysis built into one of those criteria. Federal grants almost always require a 20% match. So you want to build another big bridge over the highway, over the I-95? Who's going to pay that at 20% local match? If Smart Scale doesn't fund a project, like we've just seen with Garrisonville Road, I'm not sure what county, I'm too scared to ask that what they're going to do next with Garrisonville Road, but we're going to have to talk and see what the plan is. So if the Smart Scale doesn't fund it, what now? If the federal or state grant is not forthcoming, does the locality have to fund the entire project or cancel it or change the scope or something? What do we do? Larger projects quickly become unfundable because we can't get the 20% match. Because it's hard to get that kind of money. And here's just a graphic of the problem. You get 80% from the federal government, gets you most of the way there, but you're still going to come up with that. Well, where do we get that? The future doubling of the population, which we've just shown you, we'll need to raise more funding for transportation projects somehow. What's the how? Virginia Secretary, and this, I'm being a little bit naughty, but I don't think anyone's going to get upset because the Secretary for Transportation has done this now multiple times. So I think he might be giving us a hint. So maybe shoot me dead if I'm wrong. I don't claim to know everything. But he seems to be hinting because every time we go to the CTB spring public hearings, he reminds us that Hampton Roads has got this regional transportation authority and they bring in most of the money themselves. And because he says it so many times, I think it's a bit of a hint, don't you? I think it's a hint. Blame me if it's not a hint. Blame me. I said it, all right. But I think it's hinted. And we have members of the state legislature every year coming up with this regional transportation authority for this region, not consulting us ever, not ever talking to any of the jurisdictions here, and dumping it in the legislature. And then there's this mad scramble. Do we like this? Do we hate it? Are we going to go and scream? Are we going to send a letter? Are we going to complain? What do we do? So I'm suggesting, next slide. Well, there's a list of them. I'm not going to bore you with that. It's the various grants and opportunities that there are. Next slide. Even the State Streets for All requires a local match for the projects, right? Repeated attempts, I told you this. We should formulate a response while we have the time. King George supervisor said, if you're going to discuss the possibility of a regional transportation authority or some kind of mechanism like that to find some more money, can we please be included in the conversation? They're not in FAMPO, but they're in the region and they would like to be part of the conversation. So my suggestion that we think about a joint subcommittee of FAMPO's policy committee with the two rural counties, with the King George and Caroline, with the GWRC jurisdictions, to just formulate at least thoughts collectively on what we're going to do about the future funding. And if another legislator dumps this proposal into the Virginia legislature, what should our response be? They're only going to do this at the earliest November and probably only January. But if we in August and September formulate our ideas, then there's no mad scramble in November, December, or January. We've thought carefully when we're calm, when we're not angry because they didn't consult us. We've thought about our response and we can give some more measured, thoughtful responses to what I think is going to happen again. I think they're going to again propose it. Whoever gets elected will propose it. We should think about it. So that's my story about the future vision. The three parts. The map showing you where the growth is going to happen. The suggestion that we think about priorities, which I think Mr. Kelly raised at the last or the previous meeting. And then the funding, which is, I'm suggesting that we put together in August, because July, we have no committees and the other recess, but in August, we have a little committee, 1 or 2 from each jurisdiction, to meet and talk about future funding, what we need, what we don't need, what we like, what we don't like. And then I'll help formulate a response for things that happen that we can't control. I'm done.
So, you know, being fairly new, I think I still am, year 1.5, but, you know, it would be helpful if there was a pro and a con to the Regional Transportation Authority. What you would consider the positives and the negatives.
Yes.
And I think part of the issue with the last time this got brought up, it was brought up by somebody who doesn't represent this area.
Yes.
Who took it upon himself to make quite a leap without any consultation that I know of, at least. And frankly, when I reached out to him, I got nothing back. I don't know if you all reached out to him as well, but, you know, that was a little offensive. I hate using that term overly, but so I think for somebody like myself, you know, I don't have a lot of experience with Regional Transportation Authority. Can you put something together?
Sure.
Yes.
So I think in addition to the pros and cons, and that's a good starting point where you mentioned that, Lori. So I would like to look at specific data, looking at, you know, had we had a transportation authority over the last 3 to 5 years, how much revenue could we have generated and how would it have assisted us in projects, and really look at, and then look forward. What would those potential projections be on what we could generate in money? Because without that data, for me, it's a non-starter. I can't have a conversation unless I've got numbers in front of me to look at. That proves to me we would be getting a bigger bang for our buck in this entire region and leveraging our dollars. Because that's really what it's all about. And then there was one other thing I had. A question, I mean, I'm still mad that, I don't know if it's the state, but the General Assembly, they sold our pavement out on Interstate 95 for the express lanes. That was pavement I think we already owned, and they sold it to Transurban for 50 years or 100 years, whatever it is. Do we know, are those express lanes actually generating the revenue that they're supposed to for Transurban? And is there any clause in there whereby we could take that road back at some point in time if it's not doing what the state expected it to do?
We've got some VDOT experts here, so I'll just say 2 thoughts, and then if they want to comment, they probably know more details than I do, but there are a number of clauses in there requiring the payment of certain money from Transurban to the state in exchange for that contract, right? It is a long-term contract. I think it's 99 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that sounds very.
It's a very long contract, and it has clauses in there which say that you cannot add lanes to US 1 during that period because it could remove income from the express lane.
Under certain conditions, I know.
Yeah, but they get consideration.
Yeah.
It's very areas
Yes.
where the speed limit is 55 and over, so it's certain conditions.
Correct. So there are limits there. Also, there are conditions. If you want to buy them out, it's really expensive.
We essentially got a guaranteed cash flow in exchange for variable cash flows. The Transurban essentially made a bet that they would get more money this way. That's what this was. It was.
And so
I would just like to know if it has produced the financial results for them that they anticipated.
Well,
Obviously not with COVID. And now everybody teleworking, I would think that the answer is no.
And then with
I don't know.
the comprehensive agreement was redone, the ARCO was redone the second time for the FedEx lanes. Some newer terms were written in, and that's when some of the cash payments came into play. The finance for the river crossing as well. one payment coming out to northbound.
Projects, 395, and that's all coming from money from.
And some of that.
They're doing pretty well.
So, and that was part of the revenue projection, if we took a cash payment up front instead of the anticipated revenue projection payment, so some very complicated financing agreements as the part of that.
Right, exactly. That's what the premise is to say, is to give the government body certainty while they're taking the risk, but the reward that comes with the risk. So, I mean, if it works for Transurban, that's not our problem anymore.
Right, no, I understand, but at some point, I'll get with you. I want to understand that just a little bit better for my.
We can help find information that is available. If it's not available, I can't. So we
Transurban does have on their public
Yeah.
website, they do release, a certain amount of financial information about how the managed lanes are producing and what they're not, so there's a fair amount of,
Thank
that
you.
information, the comprehensive agreements, now that they finalized, for all the lanes, they are publicly available too. So I think, I know we've released them a couple different times,
Yeah.
that people hear about this forum.
So
You can read through all of those volumes if you're
Fine.
interested.
Just go online and it's all there. Thank you.
but I do think we should get back to what our priorities are. I know you can't answer all tonight, but
There's some other things we need to figure out.
Well, yeah, Mr. Kelly,
Just add on the financial side of things. And this has been the case for years, even since it's changed and everything else. On this current plan that we want to have in FAMPO, under the current financial rules and regs that we have in place, we cannot provide the transportation infrastructure to support this level of development. And two. Question one. We have gone down this road 4 to 5 times since I've been on this board. And each time it ends up with, that's my piece of it's my sandbox, and I don't want to play my sandbox. If that's what we're gonna do here, let's stop now. If you cannot look at this map and see what we're looking at and understand this is a regional issue, and we're gonna go right back to my sandbox, we're gonna be wasting our time again, and frankly, I don't want to see wasting time. I've been through this at least 4 times. That's one. Next question. Looking at this map, are we accepting this and planning for this? Or are we looking at this and saying, wow, we might have to make some changes the way we're developing our region? That's a fundamental question. Not too long ago, I gotta give you credit for it. Charlottesville, Albemarle County sat down as jurisdiction and they did joint planning sessions on what Charlottesville was going to do and how it's going to impact on the county, how Albemarle County could develop, and they frankly changed the direction and the course of their development. You go back and look at that.
Were they overdeveloping?
What they ended up deciding to do, seeing that they were sprawling out, they went ahead and started doing development nodes within their area as opposed to spreading out.
You can't keep going.
You can't keep going flat. If you look at this map, we're going significantly flat.
Yeah. So I want to piggyback on that. And so I was taking a look at some of these different corridors. And I think there's a way, yes, I'm coming from maybe the city's perspective, but I also know that there is a desire for the counties to preserve a lot of the rural land that exists today. And I think we can do that. And I think when we talk about it, what are our regional development needs in terms of transportation plus land use, when we combine those two? What is the most cost-effective form of land use? It's density in targeted locations so that we don't have to build more roads, we don't have to expand more roads. So, maybe, for example, we have all of this, this population increase here. Why not here? Why not build up? Sorry. Sorry. Why not here?
Because that's what I'm doing.
Why not here? Why not here? Why not more here? I mean, I'm not skipping over the city, don't get me wrong. But, you know, in general, the more that we do, just like what Mr. Kelly's saying, build out flat from a tax perspective, that costs us way more. We will be taxing our residents more, the more we build out in a sprawling flat pattern. That's been proven time and time again in Virginia and other states around the country. We have to start building up in targeted areas, and this way we get to preserve our green space, such as growth and
I just had one more point to make. We're talking about class phase, which is all on the financing situation. Understanding what you said with regards to bridges, but I'm going to use the bridge as an example here. If this region is serious about building one bridge with Rappahannock, how much money is Stafford and Stafford and the city and willing to pay to make that happen? Because right now, under the current dynamics, that is not going to be funded as smart scale project. It's not. Because we don't have the funding to leverage that project to make it work. And that's not only that project, but any significant project in this region. If we do not leverage it, chances of it happening are slim to none. So when we start talking about future transportation funding and the pros and cons, this is what your choice is. We don't do anything, so we don't want to do it. And then congestion continues to grow, business development goes down the toilet, and we're in bad shape. Or we find a way to find money to be able to play the game that we're now being told we have to play. And the biggest component in that game we're playing right now is Hampton Roads, Richmond is now doing, and Northern Virginia has done, to find funding to leverage significant projects. So unless you're willing to start coming out of your general fund revenues, which is fine, we have that discussion, but you're going to have to find money. And on any big projects, we can put them in smart scale counts compounding. They get fine. I'm going to recognize that I was the road.
All right, Ms. Gary, are you sure?
Yeah.
All right.
So going back to what I totally understand, I totally agree with you 100%. So if I ask you, if you've been through this process 4 times,
Please.
the personalities sitting around the table were different. My question would be, was trying it on, if we approved an RTA for our region and King George and Caroline were included, what other steps did you guys take back then through the 4-time process that was not productive, that we shouldn't repeat again? And you may not know all those answers.
The key thing with the very first question I asked is going in here and understanding this is a regional map, and this is going to be a regional problem, needs regional solutions. But it's all, and you're right, a lot of it's personalities. It's immediately, no, this is my piece of the pie. I'm not going to let you tell me what to do with it. It's not your job to tell me what to do with it. Wait a minute, you're going to, I mean, one of the things I've said consistently since I've been here, we are the small players at the table. I fully understand that. I fully understand that the most significant projects, including impacting the city, will need to happen outside the city. I understand that. I have supported projects in Stafford. I supported projects in Spotsylvania County before I supported projects in the past for the city of Fredericksburg, because I realized that's the case. It helps you, it helps me, it helps the region. It's getting to everybody to have that attitude instead of, wait a minute, there's only so many dollars. Once you start saying there's only so many dollars out there, then everybody goes, and man, you've been through this numerous times where, oh, no, wait a minute. We've got to make sure we get all the projects in our account. And we only want to put our 5 projects in. We don't want them to put any of their projects in. We've been through that for the last 40 years. And that's Spotsylvania trying it. When Stafford tried it, tried to corner the market on projects and funding, Spotsylvania tried to corner funding. I can say to you, again, we're the small players at the table. You guys are big guys. We understand that. We want to be regional players. It behooves us to work regional, not only on this, but fire, disease, education, you name it. It makes sense for us to do that. It's the question I got is the rest of the region willing to look at this map and so approach problems regionally and not get back into its my piece of the pie?
Because I don't want to look like Denver. Talk about sprawl.
What do you think? Oh, the sprawl that you see in Denver, yes. It's ugly and it's expensive. I mean, we talk about, the, future state of our region, the number of people. I mean, those roads, well, we don't need a VDOT issue for the counties to maintain the roads, but sidewalks, et cetera. I mean, yes. But, I mean, the maintenance bill, when those things come due, I mean, it's gonna be nuts. And yes, there's water and sewer, considerations for an increase in population. Of course, that's always going to happen. But it's going to be a lot cheaper to maintain if we can decide on these are the areas where we're going to grow, and then the other areas we don't. And we come up with a regional approach and why we're doing that. I'm gonna, Mr. Yakubowski isn't here tonight, so I'm going to channel him as a priority. Tell him I did it. This is what he said before, is that, we want to focus on our people staying in the region. We need to provide them with a reason to do so. And that doesn't happen when we concern ourselves first and foremost with trying to make sure everyone's got 3 acres. It comes when we have consolidations of people and the network effect of those dense numbers of people. That's where the businesses will also want to locate as well. If we can provide places, not just subdivisions, but real places, that is what's going to drive the economic development of this region, especially in the post-COVID world.
So I appreciate you saying that. However, I have to say that in our mixed use projects that we have done, they have not panned out in the way that it should be. Right, the commercial piece doesn't always come to fruition. They come back, they wanna make more residential. So these little pods or, like live, play, work, city type thing has not really been successful in Pennsylvania. Secondly, while I understand the concept and I appreciate that there is a place for that concept, I don't believe that the majority of the citizens in Spotsylvania County desire that, to look like that. Particularly if you look at where the VRE station is on Route 17. That is not what they want. I get it. You want people to use the VRE, you want people to use buses, you want that. But the overwhelming response that I get from my constituents and really Spotsylvania as a whole, Jacob Lane can speak to this as well, but is slow down. We've gone too far. We have like 10,000 units that have been approved that have not come to fruition yet. I mean, it is like wildfire there.
They're in there somewhere.
And it's bad.
No, I completely hear you that the growth that you're seeing in the county is unprecedented.
Unchecked.
Well, and I
Unchecked.
think of it as an opportunity to check it. I mean, if it's whether it's like transfer develop rights, I think I say if you do it a little bit more targeted, then those residents who are saying, hey, don't do this here. I think you can still do that. That's what I'm saying. That's the trade-off. I mean, just like Mr. Willis had talked about at the beginning, we're going to have to make some trade-offs. Are we going to let the developers tell us, I'm building a subdivision here, or are we going to say, no, you're not? But if you want to develop these places that are around the public transit that we already have, or we create transit nodes in partnership with our transit agencies, then we say, this is where crazy donuts, and that is where you can make all of the density you want. This other part, no, we are protecting it. And then and it's just being more thoughtful and more deliberate rather than waiting for the proposals to come to us and feel that we're helpless.
And just to tag on to that, and I think that goes back to, again, getting more data from, the bus system and the VRE. And, that has not come back to the point pre-pandemic levels. I mean, I know we rebounded more than the other areas. I don't know, I missed that meeting because I was at the supervisor training, the last meeting that we had for VRE. But to get more in data on where, not just the lines, but the actual bus stops, who's using it, all of that stuff, because, I'm not convinced. I want to know if you have an apartment building right next to VRE, how many of the, and we had this conversation in, how many of those people that live in that apartment building are actually using the VRE? How many of those people are using a bus? How many of those people are just getting in a car and driving and contributing? Well, I'm just saying in concept.
So
Conceptually.
that's a great question, or serious questions. And I think there's one part that's missing to it. And that is, for example, if you think like building a route, we could be providing a situation where we're not putting an adequate enough service for the bus to make it viable as a transit network, as opposed to, say, a social service and last resort. And that becomes inherent upon us to provide frequency to make it viable. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a leap of faith in that regard, but only because it has been proven, and I believe that in the East-West mobility study, which is the point that was made, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 15-minute headways. If you do not build a transit network,
15 minutes is about
does it come within 15 minutes, people aren't going to die. And so that is data that we have been providing. So that we do know. And right now, I don't believe there's a single line on our FXB Go that does that today. And so if we're not providing it, that's on us to improve that so we can see what that record should look like. The other part is when you talk about, are those people going to be taking the VRE if they're sitting right next, if they're living right next to the VRE? One of the great things about building around transit, this is what I've seen in other cities around the country, is that when you build that density around the transit node, you end up with other businesses, and that brings more people who want to live there or close to there. And so they may not live there because they take the VRE, but they might live there because it provides a certain lifestyle that they can just live in that little area without having to go very far for a lot of their amenities. So I want to make sure that we don't.
But that's not how that is not what we're seeing. That is not how the mixed use is functions.
What we're looking at, what you missed on VRE.
I was just gonna tell her.
Well, there's actually two thoughts there. All right, we are now we will basically reinvent and redirect VRE away from being a total just commuter service and waiting. We are now looking at, we have the capability to do weekend train service. And not just in the morning and come back in the afternoon, maybe one train in the morning, one mid-afternoon, one late. So if people want to come down and then spend the day here or go up and spend the week in Washington, they can do that. We're looking at express trains now because we need for our people to get up there and not have to do some stops, and you need to be quicker to get up where they need to go to get back home. And we're looking at more midday service, midday trains going back and forth. So that is already, and it's the direction that we're going. We are going to reinvent VRE. Another thing that we look at with regard to transit and it's going to be topic that needs to be part of the conversation. We have Fred and what we can do with Fred. As of right now, the RTC, the bus system in Northern Virginia, what's it doing? It's already taking commuters from North Stafford and now we're taking responsibility County and moving them up to 95-4. Do we bring the RTC into this conversation about what level of transit they can provide at these requirements region? They've already established the expertise, the knowledge, the funding, the governance, because one of the things we have to talk about Fred, I'm not ruling Fred out, but it's always been a problem in this room, talking about Fred and who's running it and how it's run, it's usually pretty much under the city, but there's another player in the room that we can bring down into our area if we want to. It might have to be incremental, it might be a joint project or something else, but I want to throw that out there now, that we have an opportunity to jump probably a little bit quicker on the transit front if we broaden the conversation on use of the road.
So I want to bring this back around to the items. And I think we probably, I'm actually going to channel what, at least what we've done in the city for vision in the past. We have in our vision plan, a couple dozen items, granted it's for high locality, not, some consider around transportation. So for here, I'd like to suggest that maybe we come up with maybe half a dozen statements about priorities for this region in terms of what we think, based on what we know, what we've seen, what we think this region should become, and what are the things that we think we need to prioritize. You know, and I'd like to just give, all the members an opportunity to throw out an idea or two, and I'm going to ask either Connor or Coley to take these down so that we can have a running list and make sure that we know what's being discussed and that we can come up with something, because I think without that list, we're going to go in circles. Staff is not going to have direction in terms of building around that, because what I'd like to see is that when staff brings something to us over the next year, they can go back and link it back to these vision statements that we have. And it'll focus their time, it'll focus their efforts. And that way, I think there's going to get a lot more productivity out of staff as a result.
Connor, is the recording still on?
Yeah, it should be.
Oh, and I think we have members online as well.
So we'll record.
Yeah, there's some numbers
I
online.
don't mind, I'm just gonna bring that one map with the speaker microphone on there. But if the recording picks it up, then we don't have to handwrite it now, we'll be able to, dictate on the. Yeah.
As long as we can bring it back and share it to all the members.
Would you like me to put you'd like me to put the map on the screen?
I'm sorry?
You want me to put the map on the screen?
Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Well, that's what I was saying. I wanted to make sure that the members online also have.
Yeah.
Just there.
Oh, yeah.
Our recording, so if you speak clearly, we will take down the points and we will put them on slides, we'll bring them back to you, we'll always meeting, that's what we would like.
We're looking at the picture of looking at direction and what areas we want to look at.
Well, I think the vision will inform that. I mean, so. I don't know, did you look at your hand started to go up there for a second? I couldn't tell. Just wanted to.
Yeah.
All right.
So I had this conversation with our planning partner about this, overdevelopment. Let's just say that, right? There's lots of projects coming through. Some of them are in the areas that are identified for that. Some of them are kind of outside of that. And one of the things that we were going to be working on is more small area plans.
Okay.
So like, for example, the Bowman Center, a small area.
Okay.
Right? So in talking to planning and trying to figure out, it's such a big area, right? Like, what does this look like? And the comprehensive plan is a living document. It doesn't mean it's guided, right? It doesn't mean it's set in stone. So we were going to take small area plans like the Bowman Center. Bowman Center is an area that the cities would certainly benefit from. County does as well. So, I don't know that this is a vision statement necessarily, but maybe we start, instead of looking at this huge area, maybe, because it's too much to comprehend to me, is looking at an area that needs attention, right? Small area that has a regional impact, like the Bowman Center.
So, all right, thank you. Good. I get what you're saying there. I don't know if you're familiar or if your staff has been familiar. The city is actually doing small area plans, and we have been the past few years. So please, get in touch with from our experience. They're I'm sure there's some lessons learned. and
Right,
to
sure.
Help, your staff and your board. So I'm gonna start this, and I'm just gonna ask members both in person and online as a vision statement. Is that FAMPO wishes to develop in targeted areas, preserving the rural nature of others, and providing for a transportation network in those dedicated, prioritizing those dedicated areas where we anticipate the most growth. So that kind of takes your small area plans into account. And it is regional without having to worry about being targeted. Does just that initial statement, I just kind of want to get some feedback and thoughts from that.
I think you need to narrow down just a little bit, because again, right now we're FAMPO and we're supposed to be focusing on really our job is transportation. What you're basically talking about, you want to be able to have a regional development which has sustainable transportation solutions or something to that effect. We are going to develop to a level where we can build the infrastructure necessary to support it.
And our
that gives you a lot of options to discuss with them.
Yeah, so then maybe we say, our goal is to develop sustainable transportation solutions and develop land use policies accordingly.
Prosperity.
Look at that, transportation planning to obtain a sustainable.
Now, what is everybody's definition of sustainable transportation?
I think we very, very
Well,
much.
again, you're talking business now, you're not getting into detail.
Yes, well, but the word sustainable, that becomes the issue, but I think, I do kind of, well, I'm asking for feedback. That's what.
To me, it's really, are we willing to discuss that map and the understanding that that map needs to change? That's a game changer in regional conflict. Right there. Then the other question that's a game changer is looking at anything we come up with, if you do land use and stuff like that, it's going to come down to obviously at the end of the day, dollars and cents. And what are we as jurisdictions willing to do to pull our, I'm not even going to say regional transportation authority. What are we willing to do to pull our resources to ensure regional transportation projects are funded? Because again, it's not any county that want to become a transportation authority, but they want to see some projects done, and then when they for the tank, what are we willing? Because again, I know it's going to be hard. I know it's going to be a huge hard sell right now in Spotsylvania County. But tell me something, there's projects in Spotsylvania County that you guys want, you're not going to get unless there's additional leverage funding. And what I think we need to be able to say is we realize that we need to come together as a region to help that funding process.
And the city probably would raise their hand and say yes on projects that connect to the VA clinic, for example.
Absolutely. There are a lot of things that benefit all of it.
Are we willing to have that level of conversation?
Wilmington is another great example. I mean, it's at our border, and two, it's not where it needs to be.
Right,
Your folks will have to come out of Wilmington or get on our roads, and
right,
it's.
which needs,
No.
that
Yeah.
needs a lot of help. Yeah, that's an issue next
So
year.
too.
No.
We all agree that
Right.
we should be redone as a joint. We have areas good, but we're all, to make these things happen, we are going to have to basically share resources, and we're finding a way to share a resource. I mean, that's the reality.
Well, I agree with you, and I think we're kind of at a no-brainer position. But I do believe that our public needs to be educated about what the growth looks like now and into the future, because, they'll say, well, like you said, stop building houses. Well, some of these things were approved many, many years ago by prior boards that we don't have control over. And also the way everything's set up with the General Assembly, we have to have real reasons to deny applications. When they come before us, we can't just say, oh, we don't like the color of the brick that you're putting on the building, or, your transportation analysis isn't adequate. They'll go back and do another one. I mean, you can only poke holes in applications so much, and so our hands are tied sometimes.
I completely get that. I mean, that, yeah, that 1975 Virginia Supreme Court ruling that prohibits a moratorium on development. I mean, yeah, that needs to be shouted from the rooftops, particularly in the counties, because I think there's a lot of people who are saying, why don't we just stop? And you say, because it's practically illegal. Here's why. But I think that this board right here is where you can start to create that rebuttal and to say, no, we're gonna stop that development. Why? Because we are redesigning our land use to focus around sustainable transportation, recognizing some of the principles that not everyone can get in their own car and drive to a particular destination, if given the space and the level of population. Just like from the congestion workshop, it's a problem of geometry. It's not an ideology problem. It's just math.
And people are leaving this region. I mean, we all know people that have said, you know, I can't stand traffic around here anymore. And they're moving out of the state.
But we also have
All of our
people.
kids are moving to find other opportunities for employment.
Right.
As I'm thinking, can I make one comment on this discussion you're having now? In the new big development, housing, residential development, people are going to move in and bring cars. VDOT is allowed to say, well, you have to put in a little turning lane at the entrance or something small. Things to ameliorate the impact of the additional cars. What it can't do and what doesn't happen is you add those 5,000 cars and their impact on that whole road. You can do nothing about that, but that development generates a massive amount of traffic. And that little turn lane at the entrance doesn't solve, and Route 3 is the primary example, right? All that development that's happening in Orange County and Culpeper, it's all going to come down Route 3. And those people and that developer is not going to widen and upgrade Route 3, right? Most of Route 3 is an hour route. And then everyone's going to knock on FAMPO's door and say, hey, you got to find money because you're going to fix this road. So the trouble with the US legal system, I think, or maybe there is a way around it, I don't know, but what I hear is you can only ask the developer to make small, you know, at the entrance to the development type of infrastructure for transportation. You can't improve the corridor that those 5,000 cars are going to cause. And that's the disjuncture. There's a missing piece there. How do you get that development to also pay it extra for the fact that we now have to widen the road? Because it's a whole corridor that's now impacted.
It's called the Dillon Rule, Virginia.
Yes, but the point is that for transportation, this provides a problem. And so maybe through some sort of a taxation system, you have to solve. I don't know. The point is, it's a problem. Because when you put another 5,000 houses, it doesn't just affect that entrance way. It affects the street all the way into town. Whether it's whichever jurisdiction, whether it's in Pennsylvania or Culpeper, or whether it's in Stafford or whatever. There's got to be some leak, and I shouldn't, we can't fix it tonight.
Yeah.
This is something that I think
What
about.
legislation do we need that will help us?
Well,
Anybody have an answer?
I mean, even the Dillon rule won't be able to help us for a development in Fauquier County, you know, throwing everybody down 17.
Well, look at Orange County's big project that they just approved.
Right.
Now it's gonna be built out over 20 years, you know?
But, I mean, but these are the problems that we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve the problems of 2045,
Correct.
2050. So it's back to the vision part, because, I mean, yeah, we could be here all night on this,
Yeah.
and we're getting close to it anyway. So, but I do think we need to have a set goal. So what I'll ask staff is to set aside time, maybe the August meeting, to craft those priority statements. Because I mean, because what we just had here tonight, you know, I appreciate the conversation, appreciate the, you're right, but what we don't have is what is the desired end state? And we need to have the goal in mind. Otherwise, yeah, we're just gonna sit here, hold everyone.
So maybe we come up with some statements.
Like 6 points.
Yeah. Right.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw some, that I'm concerned about, I think I'll probably be on board with this. I think we need to make sure that we focus on conservation and that we advocate for more state for our coastal, issues. I know they have the coastal resilience master plan that came out, but I don't think it helps some of us because we are more rural and we have the higher density of resources. But just something to keep a focus in this. And I think if we do that, it'll help us kind of figure out some of the other things.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea, and that concept of sustainability, there's an ecological component as well as a more developmental.
And it's expensive for us to do that.
Do you each want to send us one sentence that we can put together on a page, and then you can fiddle with them at your next meeting? So in other words, it's not a blank sheet, but it's like, here are the 10 sentences you sent us, and then at the meeting you can word stuff, changes. Because I don't want to come to you with a blank page in August, and then start with that.
Homework.
Homework.
Yeah, not policy. GW region, you send us text, send me a sentence. Or 2 sentences if you put, send me a sentence, I'll put them all on one page. I'll make it on my page, and then you can sort them and
All right, thank you. All right, let's wrap this up. Let's move on to the resolution approving the slate of officers to serve in FY '24.
See the names, we have a resolution prepared, but we haven't got any names on it, because we need to tell who the nominee from Stafford is, who the nominee from Spotsylvania is, and who the nominee from the city of Fredericksburg. And it's Stafford's turn to pick the chair, and then Spotsylvania would be the first vice chair, and Fredericksburg would be the second vice.
I thought we did this a couple of meetings ago, did we not?
No, not for FAMPO. So Stafford's in the barrel. Who's taking it? Don't fight her.
Meg Bomke for chair. Not me, ha ha ha.
She hasn't said anything all night. She
Gets her spot.
That's not bad news.
Yes, it was.
This has been up. I'm more than happy to
Accept the nomination?
Yes.
Thank you.
If that's okay with Monica.
Great. Well, thank you. Stafford County.
Spotsylvania.
So I was.
Spotsylvania, I would like to nominate, well, go ahead, Lori, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead, Jay.
Well, I would like to nominate the Honorable Lori Hayes from the Lee Hill District of Spotsylvania, please. I wanted to make sure I got that in there first.
Foundation movements, I swear to God, we did this months ago.
That's funny.
No,
You drop.
we made you the
Yeah, the
second vice chair, they're now nominated.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. All right, sorry.
I'm changing the personnel.
Gotcha, all right, okay.
Quick point here, if I may, we've got about 25 minutes for a major song line comes right there.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, City of Fredericksburg.
Fredericksburg nominated the second vice chair.
Yep. I'll say it.
Okay. If you could please, just ask if that is.
Do we have a motion for approval?
To everybody.
So moved.
Put in the names and sign.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Chairman.
The last item except for correspondence is, above and beyond.
Jason, thank you. Your last meeting. Shadow Spring. You're the best. You did a great job. We thank you for your leadership, your ability to keep us on track. No, I really mean that. It's hard to keep a board moving and not let us go off on all tangents. This was a very productive conversation tonight. And on behalf of the FAMPO board, give this to you for your dedicated service and this certificate.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
All right. Yes.
Second. All those in favor?
Bye. Thanks.
Yes. All right, and with that,
Correspondence, you have it in your packet, I think we need to read that.
staff agency reports, not here yet. Board member comments.
What was the name, Dane Lee, just in writing.
Yes.
I just wanted to comment to that I just had personally and for everyone personally, but that really is meaningful to me and I can continue to help. I've depended fully on public transportation for my life and I know that's.
Staff and revenue sharing applicant pre-app for due this Friday, the 30th. I'm sure your staffs are aware of that. Make sure they're in. If you don't submit a pre-app, can't submit a final line.
Got it. Thank you very much. And with that, we are adjourned.
All right. Thanks, Matt. About the storm. Okay. Everybody be safe driving home. And, Ian, we would like a map here too.
You pretty much
Right.
You saw, I'm gonna take the full one, we can send over the map on email, so if you got.
Maps on email, then we can make some out.
I can send you a version.
Yeah, that's got the colors. Yeah, okay. Great presentation. I really appreciate it. We need to take it and move forward. Honor. Oh, that's right. All right, thanks a lot.
So thank you.
And you guys do. Stay here.
Bye.
Drive safe, y'all, too.
And you need your signature, we can deal with the names.
Oh, yeah, we can do it one,